All of you, welcome to the third Worldwide Academy technical webinar on light characters. The first two webinars generated a lot of good discussion on LinkedIn, and this is exactly what we wished to achieve, as the knowledge is in the Aids to Navigation community. It is actually with you, and by this means more people can benefit from it. I therefore invite all of you to join the Ayala discussion group on LinkedIn. I will now give the floor to the Deputy Secretary General of Ayala, Mr. Omar Fritz Eriksson, for an update on important Ayala matters. Omar, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Geraldine, and good morning, afternoon, good evening, everybody. I hope we find you all in good health and spirit in this day and age. Now, an update on Ayala. There is one item which is important, very important for us to share with you, and that is the fact that we have now for a decade worked on a project which we have called the IGO project, Intergovernmental Project. And the idea behind that is that we would like to transform Ayala from being a non-governmental organization, an NGO, to an IGO, an intergovernmental organization. We have had a number of preparatory meetings. We call them preparatory diplomatic conferences. And we had the final actual diplomatic conference in Malaysia in February last year. Since then, we have been waiting for a government to sign the resulting convention on the new Ayala. And that happened on the 27th, if I can move here, on the 27th of January, the French government signed this convention. So now we are en route, on our way to becoming an intergovernmental organization. We would need a number of coastal states to sign this convention. And when we have 30 states that have signed the convention and ratified it at their parliaments, or in their parliaments, we will transform into an intergovernmental organization. So that is the breaking news from Ayala. Still breaking since a couple of weeks. Excellent. Now, the Ayala buoyage system is one of the major achievements of the association. And one of the core aspects of the buoyage system is the mechanisms which ensure that mariners are able to distinguish one mark from another and recognize a particular mark for what it is to improve their situational awareness. Since the beginning of times, mariners have relied on light signals for nighttime navigation. And today we will learn about this aspect of the maritime buoyage system, how we use light characters to identify marks. So I'm sure that you will find this webinar quite interesting, and I wish you all a good webinar, and hopefully a lot of questions and some good answers afterwards. So over to you again, Geraldine.
Thank you, Omar. This series of technical webinars is developed to address some specific challenges related to aids to navigation worldwide. And each of these webinars include a lecture on such a topic, and a case will be presented, and you will have the opportunity to discuss or ask questions. The subject of today is light characters. As I found during my technical missions, I often observed the use of wrong light characters. For example, an isolated danger character at a port entrance breakwater beacon. Truly shameful and a danger to navigation. Before we start, I would like to inform that there will be a question and answer session after the presentations. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat box or raise your hand. And after the official webinar closes, the line will stay open for a while to chat with us. And I must say that we truly enjoyed to be able to catch up with you via this more informal means. This webinar is recorded as we speak and will be posted on the Ayala YouTube channel. For now, to save bandwidth, please switch off camera and mute your microphone. No surprise, we asked the legend of light, Mr. Malcolm Nicholson, to present on this topic. Malcolm is part of the Ayala family for 20 years and the last 8 years as a chairman of the ENG committee working group on light and vision. He is the global product manager for Sealight and contributing to the Sealight's global master classes and technical training programs for aids to navigation managers. Malcolm, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Geraldine, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to present what is, I hope, a lecture and a presentation with some good practical examples that I've gained over the years. So if you're privileged enough to be able to study the AtoN Manager course through the Academy, this lecture is given within the Academy, and I have been given this presentation and I've kind of added to it and enhanced to it. But should you go and do your AtoN Manager training, which I can thoroughly recommend, you should come out with a detailed understanding of rhythmic characters, lights used in the NBS, an understanding of the periods, synchronization of lights, why we do it, and the vertical divergence. So in order for a light to be seen, it needs to have a certain amount of divergence. And there's some good practical reasons for that. Now, Ayala publications are your friends. So for the purposes of this presentation, you're going to need the Ayala MBS, which I'm sure you've all got a copy of. R110 on rhythmic characters, the guideline on the selection of rhythmic characters, 1065 on signal beam divergence, and the most recent of our productions, Ayala guideline 1135 on effective intensity.
Malcolm,
So,
Malcolm, if I may disturb you for 1 minute, I just found out that Teams has made some changes to the system, and now as a listener you can select the screen you want to see. So I advise all of you to click on Malcolm's presentation when you still see it displayed in a smaller screen. So I advise you to click on the PowerPoint. Thank you very much, Malcolm. Sorry.
okay, I shall carry on. It's not on the screen, but hopefully I'm sharing it for everybody.
Yes, you are sharing it, but it seems to be a new feature that on our end we have to click on your presentation to see it in full screen, but you are sharing it.
Okay.
So it's okay.
Somebody's got spotlight on. Does that mean okay, I shall carry on. That's fine.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Guideline 1135 is the latest production from our working group, our engineering committee, and it's great to see so many of my working group online. I hope they don't pull me up for any technical details at the end, but it's great to see them all out there. So, how do you go about presenting a flash character? Well, it's relatively easy. You have a period when the light is lit, or the flash, and a period of when it's dark, or the eclipse period. And combining the two will give you the overall period. So in this example, the light is on or flashing for 1 second, and it's in darkness or eclipse for 4 seconds. So the overall period is 5 seconds. So it's a flash 5 or flash 5S for 5 seconds. And I'm going to show you how that's entered into the list of lights in a moment. There's some more complicated characters that you can produce, such as a group occulting light here. But essentially, you shouldn't be looking at eclipse periods for less than 150 milliseconds because it can be confused, certainly at a distance, as a fixed light. And the period, the overall period, or the period of darkness, shouldn't be more than 8 seconds. And that's more specific for buoys, and we'll cover lighthouses a bit later on, because that's a more historical progression and used for landfall. So classifications of rhythms. Essentially, there's only 4 characters. You can have an occulting character where the light is longer than the eclipse. You can have an isophase character where the light is equal, darkness and lightness, such as an isophase 4 seconds, 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off. And then you can have a flashing light. Now, within a flashing light, you can have a single flashing light, you can have long flashing light, you can have group and composite flashing, continuous, quick, very quick. But essentially, they're all single flashing or flashing lights. And then you can have a Morse code light, which we use very sparingly. I think we only use U, A, and Y. A is generally used for safe watermark, which again we will come on to. So this is how they're represented within a list of lights. Now I've picked a random one here. This is Panama. Incidentally, if you don't know, we might put this link in the chat later on. This is a link to all the list of lights globally. So you can go in there, you can select it. It has all the up-to-date notice to mariners. But what you'll see here is the list of lights number, its name and its location. So for example, this is the entrance, the rear front range light, its geographical position, its character, in this case it's fixed green, height above sea level, its range 14 miles, and then some comments on it, or some sort of description on it. So these first 3, it's a triple leading line. The first 2 are fixed, and the rear is an occulting green, where it's on for 3 seconds and off for half a second. Now I'll come back to this later on when we deal with port entry lights. They've also put in here a couple of aviation lights, which is kind of why I wanted to highlight this, because mariners should use all available means to navigate. So it kind of makes sense. If there's a big aviation tower, you can use it for navigation. Just to highlight here, Isla Sanoa. This is a character we see very often, which I mentioned in the previous slide. Flash white. Its period's 5 seconds. Flash for half a second, off for 4.5 seconds. Here's another little list of lights. Some of these are a bit more complicated. So Hurst Point on the southeast coast of England. This is on the entrance into Portsmouth, opposite the Isle of Wight. It has a lighthouse that has a flash 4 white red, so it has a red sector. Short flash period over 15 seconds. So it has a just over 8 second eclipse period, but it also has a port entry light that has a much greater range, and that's to bring the larger vessels in on that channel. But you can see further down this list, for example, here we've got a quick red. Now there's no period or eclipse, but from your list of characters, a quick red is sort of 120 flashes per minute. Or 60 to 120, so it's 1 flash every second. So there's a bit of leeway in the amount of flash period and the eclipse, and you can use that to your advantage to save a bit of power. So how do we choose a character? So you either choose a character when you're re-engineering or replacing an aid to navigation, or you're establishing a new aid to navigation. And that may be because the volume of traffic and the degree of risk might have increased, and you need to perform a risk assessment. Now, IALA have 3 different methods of doing risk assessments. They have the IRAP, the POSA, or the CIRA. And if you've never done one before, you can have a go at the CIRA risk assessment, the simplified risk assessment. And really what you need to be doing is going out to your users, your stakeholder feedback, pilots, ferry captains, fishermen, leisure user, even your maintenance guys. Go out to see your maintenance guys. What's causing issues there? Why are you renewing it? So your external stakeholders are going to care about range, character, and conspicuity. So your pilots, your ferry captains, your fishermen, your leisure users, that's what they're going to care about. But your internal stakeholders, maybe your boss, is going to care about cost, maintenance, how you're going to install it, how you're going to deploy it. So you need to have a mixture of both of these put into your risk assessment, and whatever you do, you must document your process, even if it's a couple of lines. We changed the light on this buoy from a tungsten lamp to an LED. It's the same range, it's the same character, but we changed it because the pilots and the ferry captains wanted the same character and the same range. Write it down, and write it down for 2 reasons. It's a reminder of why you did it. So in the future, you can go back to it and you can look at it and say, I remember why we did this. But also, you can use it as a business case. So if you are moving from your traditional halogen or tungsten filament lanterns to LED, they may cost slightly more, but it may reduce your maintenance period. And so you can very quickly build quite a robust business case as to why you're doing it. And at least you've written it down. And then you can refer back to it. When somebody comes back at the end of the year and says, oh, you've spent so many dollars on a light, you can justify it with your risk assessment process. So I would urge you all, if you're re-engineering or establishing new aids to navigation, perform a risk assessment. And IALA or many manufacturers out there will be more than happy to assist you and help you in that process. Now, once you've done that, of course, there are specific rules that apply to buoys, and hence why the maritime buoyage system was developed and published and harmonized as much as we possibly could globally. We don't need to have any discussions about region A and B. But essentially, you have your cardinal marks that indicate safe water to the direction that it's being placed. So, for example, a north cardinal mark, the safe water is to the north of that mark, and that is a quick flash white or a very quick flash. And then it forms the face of a clock face. East cardinal is 3 o'clock, hence 3 quick flashes. A south cardinal is at 6 o'clock, hence 6 flashes plus a long flash, and a west cardinal mark is 9 flashes in succession. So as I said, the quick rate is 50 to 60 flashes per minute. Very quick is 100 to 120, and you can use either. Safe water mark, you have a choice of characters. Predominantly Morse A is used to signify a safe water mark. Morse A is dot dash, so a short flash followed by an eclipse followed by a long flash, and you can choose your eclipse period. Isolated danger is a group flash 2, and a composite group flash for a preferred channel is a group flash 2 plus 1, so it has a longer eclipse. And I want to use this splendid diagram that is all in the back of your maritime buoyage system leaflets. This took us quite a while to redevelop when I was vice chair of the working group that dealt with the last revision of the maritime buoyage system. So if you're a vessel coming in on this line here, the first thing you will see, perhaps 18 to 20 miles off, would be this lighthouse here. And that's a landfall lighthouse, if you like, or you're in the coastal phase of navigation. So you're 20 miles offshore, you've got plenty of deep water around you, you can take a bearing on that lighthouse, you're coming in, and then the next mark you will see will be the safe water mark. Perhaps you may see this at 9 or 10 miles out. They normally have that kind of range. And that'll have the Morse character on here. And then when you come in close, you're going to start to see your front gated pair of lateral buoys that are synchronized. And I'm going to touch on synchronization later on. So then you make your way up the channel. If you're a large vessel, you'll take this route and you'll get to this point here. And no doubt you'll be directed into the harbour area here, or into perhaps a larger port here, on a set of leading lines here, and then into the port entry here. And otherwise you're going to come in this way into this harbour, and you've got a couple of pier end lateral marks and a port entry sector light coming in here. Preferred channel maybe for leisure craft and fishing vessels that are coming in here and going up this route here. You may not have the need for lit beacons here, but again, your leisure user or your fishing user might increase, and you may choose to light these, and then you have a choice of LED technology, range, character. There are some specific rules that we outline in R110 with regards to flashing characters. Now, your eclipse period should be minimum of 3 times the length of the lit period, i.e. if you have a 1 second flash, the eclipse should be 3 seconds. Period should be greater than 2 seconds overall, which is absolutely fine. And if you're using a long flash, perhaps more for port entry rather than voyage, it should be greater than 2 seconds. Now, there are other rules here, generally talking about length of light and length of eclipse period. I won't go through them all, but like I said before, isophase here, it should be greater than 2 seconds. So your minimum isophase character should be isophase 4. There are rules regarding Morse. So your dots should be 0.2 second, and your dash should be 3 times the dot. So in our preferred channel, or in our Morse, in our Morse A, for our safe water mark, our dot is going to be 0.5 and our dash is going to be 1.5. There are a couple of other characters that are quite specific. You can use the emergency rec mark. That's a very, very specific character in that it's on for 1 second in blue, off for ½ second, and then on for 1 second in yellow, which is an alternating blue-yellow character. There are other alternating characters, but use them with caution. Now, I just want to take a minute. I've put this in here for a lot of the sort of maintenance guys and the more practical guys out there. Now, you can have your flash character and you can publish your flash character. And of course, you can publish your period and your flash length. But I just wanted to mention here about duty cycle. Duty cycle is the percentage time that the light is lit. And of course, that has a profound effect on the power that it consumes during that flash period. So, for example, if we take a 1 second flash in a 5 second character, if you reduce it to ½ second, you're almost reducing it to 50% of power. Now, you need a higher peak intensity to retain the effective intensity. This is for a 5 mile light, by the way, so you need an effective intensity of 77 candela, but you only need a slightly larger peak. So effectively, you can halve your power. And that's really good for self-contained lanterns. But any reduction in flash length should not affect the primary purpose of the AtoN navigation. That's very important to note. Very important to note. So when we're talking about flash lengths and eclipse periods and power consumptions, most manufacturers nowadays, and in fact even Ayala, have a free to download solar calculator. Here's an example of the solar calculator. It gives you a couple of options. You can know your product, or you can go into help me decide, where you have a set of prerequisite requirements, such as a 5-mile white flashing light, and this will help you decide what lanterns are available to give. So in this example, we'll continue the flash 5-second character in white with an effective range of 5 nautical miles. And here we see it 1 second off, 1 second on, 4 seconds off, 20% duty cycle, dusk till dawn. And this is up in the Shetland Islands. You can put your location in. And we've got GPS on this one as well for synchronization. Now you'll see here it will give you an autonomy figure, but the important factor to look at is the charge extra, the surplus charge. Now you're actually getting a negative surplus charge in the first year in December. Now this does take account dark days, and there is a bit of a misnomer about autonomy. Autonomy was a figure kind of bandied about for the worst access to a particular station, which might be up to 2 weeks. So they ensured that they had power capacity for 2 weeks of no charge. Now, in reality, that's not strictly true, because you always have daylight. You do have dark days, but there is normal daylight. So you will get some charge, unless, of course, there is actually a failure in the system. But simply by halving the flash character, what you can see here is we've increased the autonomy, but we've also put that negative charge extra into positive. So it's certainly something worth considering, but like I said, it should not affect the primary navigational reason for that AtoN. Okay, that's buoys kind of covered. Short characters, short periods, instant recognition, relatively short ranges. So you'll see them coming on once, certainly between 1 and 5 seconds. Normally, you know, your lateral gated pair of buoys at the start of your channel, you'll maybe have it 1-2 second period. When we move into port entry lights, generally speaking, they're either fixed, long flashing, isophase, or occulting. Now, there's some historical reasons for that, because, and certainly Omar alluded to it in the beginning, when we first started doing this, we had baskets with fire in it. So essentially, it was a fixed light. And then came along the electric lamp. We didn't have flashes, so we had a steady burning lamp. And then somebody said, well, if we put one in front of the other, we can have a leading line that people can come on and take a bearing. And then, of course, we developed street lighting. So our leading line became obscured through the massive street lighting. So then we started to put red filters in front of them, so they would be more conspicuous, so they would stand out from the normal white street lighting. So that's the historical development, and it's really because mariners take a bearing on it. They need to come in on that line, and that's why they need to see it, and they need to constantly see it. I would say nowadays, though, you could probably, with synchronization, you could probably go to a shorter character and have the lights synchronized, and that would, the short flash would make it stand out. Now, you might have a quick flash, for example, which might be quite effective, but we are quite a conservative industry, and pilots and mariners generally don't like change. and they like things to be just as so, and hence why we keep these characters. But he'd be interested to find out if anybody has done a quick flash set of leading lines. That would be quite good. So just give you a bit of an example from Australia, actually, or a case study of a port entry light and how it was used. Now, this was quite interesting. Port of Gladstone in Australia, it's quite a big bulk carrier on the west coast, and it exports and takes in a lot of iron ore and a lot of mining. So there's a lot of traffic coming in and out, and they have a leading line, which is a departure line, and an approach line as well. It's quite a complicated bit of waterway with a lot of traffic. And so it's the channel, the approach channel is slightly different to the departure lane of where these ships come in and where they leave. So it's quite an interesting project, and you're talking about 80,000 tons here in relatively shallow water. And it was quite a challenge with the infrastructure in that it had to be put on top of this 60-meter grain silo, but it made a suitable platform. So this is the chart here. It's relatively complicated. So you've got the main channel coming on this way, and then you've got the departure lane coming out this way, and this was what they wanted to mark here. So the ideal situation was for them to come out on a quick flash green, going into a flashing green, going into isophase, going into occulting, going into fixed, then going into your occulting white, and then into a fixed white as the middle of the channel. And of course, we can do this nowadays with modern technology, with LED technology. These lights have 10 individual LEDs that represent half a degree each, and they can be controlled individually with each different character. So as they're transiting out here on a departure, the green starts flashing quickly, and then once they get into the white, they can take this bearing line up here. So that's particularly challenging, but a great result. Now, characters for lighthouses. Now, they were historically developed for range because they marked landfall, and they wanted to be long range. So they wanted to be to the horizon. So vessels are just coming over the horizon. They're still in the ocean phase of navigation, and they're entering the coastal phase of navigation. Still plenty of water. They can still take a bearing on it because it's quite a long distance away. So the bearing line doesn't change very much. But they do have quite long eclipse periods. And that is because the light is collected from a single source, and the rotation of the optic provides the flash length and the range over those huge lighthouse projectors. So that's where you get the range. So historically, there's quite a large eclipse period in those because the character is determined by the rotation of the optic. And you don't want 6 tons of glass and brass rotating at 5 RPM. That might have some effect on the structure. But while I was doing this, it took me back to a presentation that was given by our old engineering committee, Leif Arne Larsen. And he gave this presentation in 2012. And when I was asked to do this, this really reminded me of the dangers that it can cause. So he gave an example, and this was a fast ferry coming in through the fjords through Norway. This was back in November 1991. There was a gale force 6, 7. It was a bit cloudy with some rain showers. It was dark, but they could see. Now, what happened was he missed the first flash of the character from this beacon here. He missed the second flash. he missed the third flash, and he only observed the fourth flash here. Now, when he gets to this point, this is where he starts first to see it. Now, he's lost the flash again, so he turns hard to port when he's actually seen the light. And then he considers at this point here whether he's going to make the turn in time. Decides to perform a crash maneuver, both engines full astern, warns the bridge watch to take hold of something, and they actually hit this island at 34 knots. Now, unfortunately, 2 passengers died, and there was a number injured. But the result of that was, in the Norwegian administration, is they did a full review of their aids to navigation. And what they actually came up with is high-speed craft indication lighting, whereby the tower is either lit directly by an LED or indirectly by floodlighting. And this solved a lot of problems for them, but bear in mind that this was in the mid 90s or early 2000s when they did this, and of course technology has moved along quite rapidly since then. But you can see how many they've replaced. This is nigh on 900 lights that they've replaced with this type of fixture. And the users actually love it because they have a fixed component and then the flashing light on top of it. So leading on to characters that should be used with care, the fixed and flashing is one. It can be very effective to have a low level fixed component, but you should only use about 1% of the peak intensity of the flash. So you have quite a short range with that fixed component, and then the flashing component is superimposed on the top to identify the aid. Ultra flashing is something to be aware of as well. Strobing effect, it can be quite effective, but it can also cause some disturbance. I've mentioned alternating flash characters as well, generally reserved for the emergency wreck marking, and try to avoid green and blue lights with high flash rates, high repetition rate, short flashes. They can be confused, not necessarily by the observer, but by atmospheric conditions can change and be absorbed, and they can be confused. So there are some maximum periods, as we've discussed, and this comes straight from the recommendation and as part of the lecture. So maximum periods for various different classes of character. So you see here a group flash of 3, which may be a lighthouse. So you might have a flash 3, 30 seconds, and of course that will depend on the rotational period. Now, talk about synchronization of lights, and of course this is when two or more lights flash together. It's been in used for leading lines, certainly with a hardwire sync, a hard wire between them, has been in use for several years. But on buoys, it's relatively new, I'd say 10 years, but it is such an advantage. It gives you that three-dimensional spatial awareness. It does require GNSS reception for timing, but you do only need 1 satellite for timing. You probably need 3, a minimum of 3, perhaps 4 for positional data, GPS positional data. But just for a timing signal, you only need 1 satellite. And the crystal on the circuit board should give you 20 odd minutes of synchronization until it gets another timing signal. So your GPS may pick up a timing signal every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, depending on what setting you have it on. But generally they'll synchronize for at least 15 to 20 minutes. They're very effective. And I'm very, very grateful to my colleague Partel Keskula from the Estonian administration, who sent me through some details last night. He is on the call, so if you've any questions for him afterwards, you can ask him. But this is a chartlet of an area within Estonian waters, between two islands, I believe. And here is the channel. Now you'll see it's very shallow water either side. You've only got a metre or so either side. So we have a set of range lights, leading lines here, marking the centre of the channel. And we have a number of pairs of lateral buoys. Now the challenge here is the turn. This is quite a tight turn around this bend here. So what he did is he actually put it into a simulator. Now this next slide shows two simulations, and I'm just going to go through them. I might spend a bit of time on this slide and we'll go back and forth. But this top slide shows the two laterals here from the starting point here. So this shows the two laterals here, and nothing is synchronized in this. And then the second pair here, and then this is where it goes up to the turn, and you'll see your leading lights here. Now, if you concentrate on this top one for a minute, you'll see it's quite difficult to make out where the turn might be. Now, Partel did a lot of different exercises, and what he decided on was the first two gated pairs, these two and these two, they should be synchronized. So if we look in the bottom one here, these four lights now are synchronized. And then there's a 1.5 second delay, delay to the second part of where the turning is. So these aids to navigation here, and this makes it a very, very effective solution. So you can play with simulation and you can test out your characters, and you can even get your pilots in to look at a simulation and say, what do you think of this? Do you like it? Perhaps we could have some changes here. Perhaps we could do some simulations on the character of the leading line. What do you think? But Partel did a number of simulations, and the first four were synchronized with the second part with the turning with a 1.5 second sync delay proved to be the winning combination. So if you can simulate and use synchronization, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, just to touch on vertical divergence, you'll find all the information you need in guideline 1065. So to be effective, an AtoN must be able to be detected, recognized and identified. The observer's eye is normally in line with the beam, but we have some divergence, horizontal as well as vertical, so that the mariner can be within the beam during the character. Now, fixed aids to navigation, it's never really a problem. Certainly trials I did back when I was at the GLAs in the UK, it was actually only a quarter of a degree that you needed, and you were always within that beam. I think we recommend a minimum of half a degree for fixed AtoN, but certainly with buoys, it's a little bit different because you've got pitch and roll and surge and heave and tide and all sorts of factors that go on with buoyage. I guess you would say, generally speaking, when you're coming into port and harbours, into estuaries, it's more the tidal flow that's an issue rather than the swell or the waves. But when you're going out to safe water marks, certainly with a range of 9 or 10 miles off the lantern, you're going to need a good sort of 6 or 7 meters height above sea level for it to be seen at that distance. And so you need quite a large diameter buoy, at least a 2.6 or a 3 meter, and then you'll need to consider the mooring within that as well. So there are some of the factors to look at within vertical divergence of buoys. I hope you found this interesting. I'd like to say thank you very much. Many of you will know Simon Milliard, the chairman of the engineering committee. He was gracious enough to do a presentation for us the other week, and he included some pictures of his travels around the world. So I thought I'd do the same. This is me here, starting out my career fixing lighthouses for the Northern Lighthouse Board some 20 plus years ago. Here's me doing a site survey. I think that was in Australia in 2010, 2015. And this is me with my garden light, giving it a good polish and a clean some weeks ago. So back to you, Geraldine, and we'll open the discussions and questions.
Thank you, Malcolm. Yes, I found it hilarious to be in a meeting with you in your garden virtually and see that you have lanterns in your garden. I always try to convince my husband, no anchors, no pieces of ships in the garden, please. So I wonder how your wife thinks about it, but very interesting. Thank you for this very good presentation and enlightening us on the subject. I am very happy also that you pointed out the importance of risk assessments, and please take care of all your users. So also a fisherman is important and a yacht is important. So we have to please them all and make sure they can navigate safely. Before I open the floor to questions, I wish to inform you on the possibility of having a virtual tabletop chart exercise on your light characters in a national micro seminar with us. In such a stakeholder meeting, we will act as moderator to facilitate the process of analyzing your light characters based on a chart. So please, if you are interested in such a micro seminar, you can contact me. And let me see if we have questions in the chat box, but you can also raise your hand if you want to ask a question to Malcolm directly. Let me see. So far, I don't see any questions. Omar, did you see questions or a hand raised?
There is a hand raised now. Jacobu.
Jacobu. Can you please take the floor, Jacobu?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation. I don't know if I can speak in French. It's possible to speak in French or in English. I don't know. I can try to speak in English, no problem.
You can try French as well. I think Malcolm will understand, and his reply may then be in English to ensure that everybody understands it. But go ahead, please.
Yes, I just want to know what is the relation between the number of the buoy and the length of the channel. There is any relation between the number of the buoy in the channel and the length? If I don't know if the EALA guideline didn't speak about that clearly, I don't know.
That's more of a port and harbour decision. Generally speaking, buoy number one, if it's marked as such, will be the closest buoy to the port, because when they go to maintain it, they'll be going away from the port. So that will be their choice on their numbering system, but it's for their own asset management and maintenance regime to number them like that.
Malcolm, I think the question is how many buoys do you need for a given length of channel? Do you hear me, Malcolm?
Yeah, I hear you. That's very much dependent on your risk assessment, your volume of traffic, your degree of risk, depth of channel, width of channel, whether it's a dredge channel, how much turning there is in it, the speed of vessel. I guess if you're a low traffic area with fishing vessels and coasters, no high speed ferry, no cruise ships, no container ships, your spacing between buoys could probably be 500 meters quite happily between, visibility. It's only when you start getting faster vessels and larger vessels and dredge channels. I think that's the key to it, is the dredge channels, because anything outside the dredge channel, you're at the risk of running aground. So I think you need to have quite short distances between voyages, and you may even choose to pile them. If the dredge channel is, and on the either side of the dredge channel it's very shallow water, you may have to put piles in. But it really is dependent on a risk assessment of volume of traffic and of course degree of risk of grounding and collision.
Yes. Malcolm, I have an interesting question in the chat that is really related to light characters also. How close to each other can you use, or which distance between a same light character? So if you want to use a same light character, what should you take in account?
I think, I mean, historically these characters were based on geography and imminent landfall, coastal, when you traverse the coast. And I would suggest that with the advent of modern navigation and more, I guess what I'm saying is more and more lighthouse in the digital age of navigation are more visual confirmation of position. It's more of a, I guess you call it a comfort type of thing and a backup. But I would say you probably, if you want me to put a figure on it, I'll say 100 miles. 100 miles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Omar, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Malcolm was saying, that the key here is that there is no confusion, because you cannot reuse the character close to a given position if the mariner then gets confused and is not able to identify the buoys or the marks. So you should keep them sufficiently far apart so that people do not get confused which light am I looking at. Yes. And there's a hand from Partel now.
Yes, I saw it. Partel.
I wanted to tell about this distance between buoys. In different guidelines I have met, I've seen like two possible like general guidelines. That one is that the distance could be related with range of buoy or visibility. So how far you can see the buoys. So in like maybe in case of wider channels, it could be like where you are at one buoy, you have to see at least one next buoy. So distance could be like range of a buoy, or if a channel is more narrower, it could be like you have to see two next pairs. So two buoys or buoy pairs per range. And if it gets more narrower, I have met in Finnish guideline that distance could be related with width of a channel. So I have seen that they have recommended like 5 to 10 times width of a channel could be distance between buoy pairs. So these are like a couple of practical examples I have found, but of course it should be decided case by case. But these maybe can be used as initial point or something like this.
Thank you very much, Partel. I also see that Michel Cousquer is online and he raised his hand. Michel, please take the floor.
Yes, thank you, Geraldine, and thank you, Malcolm, to this very clear presentation, as usual. I wanted to come back on rotating beacon. Could you tell us more on the flash characters from rotating beacon, and especially Is there any limit to the flash duration of a rotating beacon? Please, thank you, Malcolm.
Certainly, it's at points like this when I wish I had my famous whiteboard and draw it up for you. But essentially, the flash duration from a rotating lens is dictated by the rotational speed of the lens in revolutions per second and the width of the light source. So it's a relatively simple calculation. It's the focal length of the system, focal length of the lens, multiplied by the revolutions per second, divided by the width. Yeah, but it's certainly there. I can send it to you. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can certainly give it to you. If you bear with me, I'll pop it in the chat or something.
Okay, thanks a lot, Malcolm. Michel, does that answer your question?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you. I see a hand from Yakubu Salihu. Are you online still, Yakubu?
Yes, I'm online.
And do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. I have a question. I just want to know because I will speak in French. Hein? Please, excuse me. Ouais. En fait, vous allez vous rendre compte que le taux de disponibilité des bouées, on veut atteindre l'objectif. On a fixé un objectif suivant les recommandations de l'AISM, on a fixé un taux de disponibilité de 98%. Je voudrais savoir par rapport au taux de travail, le rythme du feu, le taux de travail, le taux de travail, le rythme du feu et la batterie par rapport au light, par rapport au feu. La batterie et le taux de travail par rapport au flashing. Le flash, quelle est la relation pour faire le choix de la batterie? Parce qu'on s'est rendu compte parfois, pour atteindre ce taux de disponibilité-là, ça a une relation aussi avec le taux de travail du feu, de la bouée. Je ne sais pas si vous m'avez compris là.
Ça c'était un peu vite, mais peut-être, Michel, tu as bien compris ou Malcolm, tu as bien compris la question?
I think it's selection of battery. Am I
yes,
nearly there?
Regarding yes. the duration of lights, regarding to the period, the working period of a light, what is the relation between the working period of a light and the battery, the capacity of a battery? How to adapt the battery to the light duration of a rhythm?
Yes, thank you, Michel. I think that that is all about your one slide, Malcolm, that you inserted, that very good slide on the difference of using half a second and a second on your battery capacity. Are you still online, Malcolm? Yeah. Omar, I'm not sure if it's on my end that my line is interrupted or on Malcolm's end. Malcolm, are you there?
Yeah, he's there. He's come back.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
back. Yeah.
So battery capacity, basically.
Yeah. So the IALA calculator, the IALA solar calculator, or our solar calculator, or any manufacturer's solar calculator, will give you the duration, but what you're actually looking for is to get positive charge. That's what you're looking for.
There's a hand from George Boujon. George, you are muted. Well, he's thinking about this or trying to unmute. There's a question in the chat. How do you select proper light range? Is there a guideline for selecting proper range for a light, Malcolm?
Oh my goodness, what a can of worms that is. And I shall give my standard ARM response of depending on the degree of risk and volume of traffic. But I think I kind of covered it in the presentation. Lighthouses are for landfall. They're for vessels that are coming off their ocean phase and into their coastal phase. So you're probably looking about ranges of anywhere between 15 to 25 miles. Leading lines, port entry lights. You may be looking at some large intensities, but you also need to be aware
Australia seems to be quite far away.
Yes, the connection seems to be poor now on Malcolm's side. Omar, if you are fine, I will officially close the website and then we can open the chat for more questions. Is that okay with you?
Yep, okay.
Yes, okay.
We will be still here.
Yes, well, that brings us to the official end of the webinar. Many thanks to all of you for joining, and special thanks to our excellent speaker. Please note that the next webinar will take place on Thursday, 25 February at 2000 UTC, where we will travel to the Pacific, and the subject is AtoN maintenance, how to reduce the total cost of ownership. I hope to see you there. So please feel free to chat a bit more with Malcolm. And actually, he's now accompanied by his dog, so that is quite funny to see. So maybe his dog can answer a few questions to us. So the line will stay open, and I now officially close this webinar. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Malcolm. Your line was a little bit interrupted, so for that reason I ended the webinar. But let us check